Hello, my name is Maria, and welcome to our webinar on best practices and benefits of baselining your project. Today we get to talk about baselining in Project Professional. We'll get to talk about the hows, the whys, the benefits, and then we'll actually get to run through it in Project Professional today. So let's get started. Okay, so here's what we'll be covering today. First off, we'll be talking about what does it mean to baseline your project. Then we're going to go into the details of why you should be baselining a project in the first place. Next, we'll be covering what are the benefits of baseline. How will it benefit you to take the time to baseline your project? And then lastly, we're going to be going into a demo of the best practices of baselining your project, how to do it with a fully outlined schedule. So what is a baseline? Baselining itself is the action of taking a fully developed or built-out schedule and copying it into 11 of the available baseline templates in Project Professional. So with Project Professional, you get 11 options of baselines. So you have baseline 0, baseline 1, baseline 2. These are columns and these are views in Project Professional that are empty until you take the action of baselining them. And I'll show you what that means in just a moment. So when you look at your baseline though in Project Professional, you'll see a baseline column called baseline start or baseline finish. And so when you take that action of baselining in Project Professional, it copies your start and finish date into those columns. So the whole process that you're supposed to be taking when it comes to baselining is first off, you're going to build out that schedule. You add your tasks, you add the agreed upon work, you add the duration, start and finish date, you get that all fleshed out in your schedule. And this can be done whether it's through Project Online, so PWA, so the Project Web App. You can do it in Project Server or through the Project Web App connected to Project Server. And you can also be doing it in your desktop application. Once this is all built out and all of the details are in your schedule, then you would take your schedule and you go to the save folder of the project. Make sure that all of the details are correct, make sure they're content with the dates, and then you can go through the action of baselining the schedule. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment when we reach our demo. So why take the time to baseline your project? First off, it gives you a reference of the original plan. As your project is progressing, and you're utilizing the auto-calculating function of Project Professional, it's going to update your schedule as you apply action. So what you want to Okay, so why take the time to baseline your schedule? First off, it gives you a reference to the original plan. When you baseline and you choose to then make updates and changes and progress your schedule, if you're utilizing the auto-scheduling function that comes with Project, any changes that come to the schedule that might not have been originally anticipated are then auto-calculated and adjusted in your schedule. So then what you can do is take your current schedule that has been progressed and compare it to the baseline. This gives you a reference and the ability to look and see if changes have happened where you may not have noticed them otherwise. The next benefit is then you get the opportunity to document unexpected changes. So let's say the client wants to change the scope, wants to change the budget or make adjustments, or something unavoidable happened. What you can do is communicate with the stakeholder of the project, come up with some new agreed upon dates or budget, etc. And then when you have that and you've adjusted your schedule accordingly, you can baseline it a second time. This way you have documentation of how your approved schedule has progressed and you have that history behind you. The next thing is that you have the documentation of approved adjustments. So again, this really does tie in with that second reason. You have the documentation of approved changes. So either if it was something unavoidable that had to happen and you communicated with the stakeholder and you came up with some adjustments, or they came to you and saying they wanted to change the scope of the project. They wanted to change something that you had all fleshed out, whether it's removing certain tasks or adding new ones. You have the documentation when you rebaseline your project. And then you get the option to compare the original plan to reality. So life happens, sometimes it doesn't always go to plan. So when you have your baseline history, whether it's just one baseline, two baselines, or all of the 10 baselines, you get to compare your final schedule to each of those baselines. you have the history, and then you're able to take the opportunity and then read these in 5, use that baseline for lessons learned. You have the story of your project and you can use it for learning for the next time. Another reason is you get to then compare your baseline to actuals in reports. So the actuals that you've documented, however many hours you've actually used, however many days actually passed, you can pull them into your Power BI reports and you can compare them in an easier to read manner. You don't have to necessarily pull in all the columns to compare one another. You can build out a report to help you better learn from your projects. So the benefits of baselining. So there's 3 benefits I want to point out here. First off, it helps you stay on track. When you have your baseline, you can pull it up to view anytime during your project. So if you don't exactly remember the agreed upon original dates or the agreed upon dates of the milestones of your project, you can pull up your baselines at any time to help you remember. So you don't have to keep this all in your memory or even all in your notes. You have it in your schedule whenever you need it. It then helps your project tell the story of how it happened, what happened, and when it happened. Each project is its own story. And just like a story, there's ups and downs, and you have the option to show that story in more detail when you take the time to baseline your project. You have the original plan. You have agreed upon revisions of the plan. So you don't have to go through emails, you don't have to go through all of your notes to find out what happened when. You can just go to your schedule to figure that out. Lastly, for lessons learned, it's really helpful to have that story in front of you. If you want to take the time and learn from previous projects, having that baseline, having the story of what was planned versus what actually happened is great for better learning to improve for the next time. It's all about improving ourselves. It's all about becoming the best project managers that we can be. And when we take the time to learn from our past projects, we become better project managers. So let's just jump into the demo of best practices of baselining. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my schedule. So I have an already fleshed out schedule here. I did cheat a little and I just grabbed one of the great templates that Microsoft has in Project Professional. So we can see this is all fleshed out. We've got hours, we've got days, we've got who's assigned to it when. I'm just going to go ahead and expand everything for us to take a look. So you can see here, this is all beautifully scheduled out. We have milestones. I can pull in, I can see the work assigned to each of these tasks. I'm going to pull it over by the duration here. And we have all of these details agreed on. So let's say I have my schedule fleshed out. I've gone to the stakeholder. They've approved the dates. They've approved the time that we'll be spending on each of these tasks. And they've approved the milestones that have been added. So now it's time to baseline my project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first go to the Projects tab here. And I'm going to go to the option here to set baseline. I'm going to click again, set baseline. So there's a lot of ways you could actually choose to utilize the baseline features. The best practices we're going to be talking about today is always keeping this baseline here. We hit the drop down, we'll see there's 11 total. But the best practice is to keep this baseline, the top one, which is actually called baseline 0. Let's always keep that one as the current baseline. Baselines 1 through 10 are historical. You use those to tell the story of your project. What's changed, what approved changes have happened to your project schedule. So now we're going to set our baseline here to set baseline, and we're going to do it for the entire project. And then we're going to go ahead and click OK. So we're going to go ahead and add a new column, and we're going to just type in baseline, and we'll see all of the baseline columns that are available within Project Professional. So we see our baseline for baseline 0. All of these columns here are baselines for baseline 1. All of these columns for each new number of the baselines. And because it's in alphabetical order, we can see 10 is next. And then if we scroll down, we can see all of the columns for each of the baseline numbers. But what we want to do in this instance is I'm just going to go ahead and grab my baseline for my baseline work here. This is baseline 0, it's my baseline work, and if I drag it over, I can compare it. There we go. I drag it over, so we can see that our work column, this is our planned work here, is the same as our baseline work. So 1532 hours, 1,532 hours. If we brought up baseline 1, which we did not use, let's grab baseline 1 work. Let's see, it's over here. We can tell it's 0. So before we baselined on baseline 0 was 0 hours, just like baseline 1. But if I had chosen to re-baseline my project because something had changed and I'd have gotten that approval from the stakeholder for that change, we would then re-baseline the project and then it would show the progression of how this has been updated. So let me show you what I mean. So let's go and hide each of the baseline columns for now. So let's say a couple weeks have passed. Tasks 2 through 5 are complete, 100% complete. We're going to pretend that it's been about 10 or so days from now. And so during those 5 to 10 days, both rows 2 through 5, 6 have been completed. So I'm going to go ahead and just click 100%. We're going to just do quick updates to this schedule. But we find out that though I had intended or planned on 40 hours for conducting my needs analysis, I actually only needed 20. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to insert a column, I'm going to do actual work, and I only needed 20 hours. And so I'm going to insert one more column, just to show how to zero out the rest. I could just change my 40 hours to 20, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to zero out the rest of my work. So that significantly changed my schedule. That decreased it by about 2.5 days. And so now my schedule's moved up about 2.5 days. But I find out, even though I was planning my draft of preliminary software specifications to take 24 hours, I find out that they ended up taking 30. So when I actual hours, we're at 30. So now if I pull up my baseline column, so I'm going to highlight actual work, I'm going to right click, I'm going to insert column, I'm going to look at my baseline work, and then I'm also going to pull up my baseline start. So I'm going to insert column, baseline start, I'm going to hide actual work for now. I'm going to hide remaining work. And I can see there's been some changes to my schedule. For example, now instead of 1,532 hours, like my baseline work, I'm actually looking at 1,518 hours. Now, if I compare my start to starts, everything's the same because the project started on time. If I inserted my baseline finish, we can see that I've managed to so far move up the schedule by 2 days. This is good. We're ahead of schedule. Now, let's say the stakeholder comes to us and says they want us to do an additional task. So after we develop the preliminary budget, and we review software specifications budget with team, they want us to, I'm going to go ahead and insert a task by right-clicking, insert task. They want us to make sure that we send the specifications to stakeholder for approval. And that's not necessarily going to be some additional work. We're going to leave it at 0 hours. It's going to be a milestone because it's not necessarily any work on us, but what it is going to be is it's going to change my link. So I'm going to link the 11 to 12, and I'm going to link 12 to 13, so that this is incorporated into my schedule. But what I also find out is that he's not intending to get this done for about the next Friday. So instead of 4/23, he's planning on getting it done on 4/30, so April 30th. So I'm going to put a lag on this task. I'm going to add my details pane. I'm going to go to task here. I'm going to click details. I'm going to give it a lag about, actually, let's go ahead and go schedule. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a delay. So I'm going to add a delay of, there it goes, it's 4 days. Delete. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my stakeholder to the task. I'm going to add a delay of about 4 days, and then that pushes the completion of the task to April 30th. So this significantly changes my schedule. This pushes it out by about a week. If we look at now at the baseline start and the baseline finish at the very top here, so the start's the same, but if we look at the finish, now we are 4 days later, or about 5 days later than our baseline finish. But the stakeholder asked for this. They approved this change. So now what we're going to do is actually re-baseline our project. Go back to the project tab. Next, we're going to click Set Baseline. So we're not just going to do the same thing we did before, just set baseline for entire project and click OK, because then we'd lose the baseline that we had previously. What we're going to do first is copy this baseline that we had saved and approved to baseline 1. To do that, I'm going to first set an interim plan. And what I'm going to do is grab my baseline 0. So this is baseline 0, and I'm going to copy that into my baseline 1. And I'm going to do it for my entire project. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So now what I've done is I have now 2 copies of my baseline. So I'm going to go back to set baseline here, set baseline, and confirm. So if I'm in here for set baseline and I click the drop down, I can see and confirm that my 2 baselines are here. Now if I wanted to compare them, I'm going to hit cancel. I could right click either here, this is a little shortcut, and we can go to different tables. And we're going to look at our baseline table here, click apply. So you can see it's changed all of my columns. So now what we're seeing is all baseline columns. So this is my baseline 1. And what I can start, or this is my baseline 0. Now what I can start doing is adding columns for baseline 1. Baseline 1, we can grab the duration. Baseline 2, we can grab the start. So baseline 1, we can grab the start. So I'm just going to replicate all of these columns, the same columns we're seeing with baseline 0, to compare them with my baseline 1 to make sure that they're exactly the same. And baseline cost, baseline 1 cost. So we can see just from the high level of our summary row that the days are the same. We can look 9.5.75, 9.75. The starts are the same, 4.2, 4.2, baseline finish. These are all the same now. And if you remember, when we first started this, baseline 1 was empty. When we pulled in a baseline 1 column, there was nothing in it. Now there is. So now what we're going to go ahead and do is reset the baseline for our tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and click Set Baseline, and I'm going to do the new baseline. So now that we've confirmed that baseline 0 and baseline 1 are the same, I can save over my baseline 0. I'm going to click OK. It's going to say, hey, you already have a baseline, and you're going to be like, that's okay. I've already saved my baseline, and you can click Yes. And now we can just see right off the bat, this changes our baseline 0. So it's now 98 days, it's going to be 1,518 hours, but we have that progression so we can compare our first baseline that we had in the schedule had 1,532 hours. Our second baseline had 1,518. And you can do this up to 10 times. You have up to 10 baselines available. The point is when you're re-baselining your project that you have had approval from your stakeholder to make these changes. Now if we go back, so I'm going to go this time, I'm going to get to my tables differently. I'm going to go to the View tab. I'm going to click the drop down for tables here, and I'm going to go to Enterprise Entry for now. So if you wanted to have the ability to compare your different baselines, one, you can just easily add columns as you need them. You have your Add New Column section here. You can always right-click and insert a column and get any of those baseline values. Or you can create a view specifically to compare your baselines. And by view, I'm actually talking about a table in this instance. So I'm going to go, we're in the View tab here, and I'm going to go to the drop down for tables. And what I'm actually going to do in this case is go more tables, because I want to create a new one. But first, I want to save myself some work. I know that my baseline table here already contains baseline 0. So I'm actually going to copy this baseline instead of starting from scratch. And you can see when I copy this baseline, these are all of my columns in my view. And not only that, last time I was in my view, or my table for baseline, I added all of these columns, and I have not taken them out. And this is a really cool trick. So let me go ahead, let's go back just for a second. Let's go cancel, cancel. Let's go back to our baseline table. I'm going to right click, go more tables. I'm going to open my baseline table. So notice it stayed the exact same way we had it. So I added all of my baseline ones. So I'm going to hide all of these columns. Hide column, hide column, hide column. And now I'm going to go back to my tables in the View tab. So I'm going to go back to tables. I'm going to go more tables. I'm going to copy my baseline table. And now you can see we forgot to remove baseline 1 duration, but there's a lot less columns in here. So what you could do as a quick way to create a table in Project Professional is add all of the columns that you want to compare. So let's say I want to organize this where baseline duration is right next to baseline 1 duration, and baseline start is right next to baseline 1 start. And continuing, so I can do the same for baseline finish, I can do the same for baseline work. I'm just going to stop there for now, but you can see the picture where I'm going with this, and you can do this with your baseline 1, you can do it with your baseline 2, you can do it for any of the baselines that you've set. You can even grab the ones that have nothing in them. It's completely up to you. But once you have things as you like them, so I want to maybe expand some columns here, maybe I want the tasks name to be a little wider. Now what I can go ahead and do is go back to my tables. I can do save fields as new table, or I can go to more tables. So in this case, let me show you how to do this way. So baseline here, I'm going to copy, and we're going to go baseline and baseline 1 comparison. And now I can see all of the columns I added. They're all the width that I had them. I can go ahead and click OK. And now I can click Apply. So now it has me registered on my baseline comparison. So if I right-click here, or if I chose to go drop down for the tables here, I can now look at more tables and see my baseline and baseline 1 comparison. I could also, if I chose to, hit the drop down and do save fields as new table. So if you build out a great table, you like how the columns are put together, you want to keep it this way, you can always save fields as a new table and then name that table however you like it. Alrighty, and then when I'm done and ready to go back to my table that I was in originally, I can click the drop down, Enterprise Entry, and I'm good to go. If you aren't connected with PWA or Project Online or even Project Server, you would just go back to the entry table or whatever table you were at previously. All right, and since I am connected to Project Online, I'm going to save my changes, I'm going to publish them. So now then I have them available for reporting in my Power BI reports. Alrighty, so today we got to talk about what does it mean to baseline your projects. We got to talk about why baseline your project. And then we got to talk about the benefits of baselining that project schedule, so what you get out of it in terms of getting the ability to tell your story of the project. And then lastly, we got to talk about the best practices of baselining your project, how to do it, how you should be tracking it, and how to copy one existing baseline into another. A little side note I do want to add before we end today is the reason we keep baseline 0 always current is because with report packs, they need to pull your current baseline when it comes to Power BI reports. And so you want to establish 1 as your current baseline, and having baseline 0 be current, your current baseline, is one of the simplest ways to go. Because if you're having your Power BI report pull your baseline, you don't necessarily want to keep updating your report to switch between which baseline is current. So using 1 through 10 as your historical and your baseline 0 for your current lets your Power BI reporting experience be a little smoother. So that's all we have for today. We're so excited that you got to join us in our webinar on best practices and benefits of baselining your project. We'll see you next time.